Unlock the power of your mind. This is Provocative Enlightenment with Eldon Taylor.
Welcome, and thank you for joining us today. This is an hour devoted to learning something more, not just about the world of shoes and ships and sealing wax, but about how, what, and why we believe as we do. An hour for the open-minded, willing to challenge some of those old ideas behind what we think we know, who we are, and who we might become. I'm Eldon Taylor, and this is Provocative Enlightenment. All right, our chat room is open, and my partner Ravinder awaits you there now. You can log on by going to eldontaylor.com/chat. So, pretty lady, tell us what's happening in your chat room today.
Oh, the chat room is always lively. We're actually just getting the introductions out of the way so that we can focus on your show and have some great conversation about the guy you're interviewing.
All right. Every week I read some of your letters as our way of respecting the very important role you play in making this show successful. Last week our show was all about how to realize the things that we really want. To that end, I introduced the subject by reading a letter that essentially argued for a right-now fix, suggesting that if it took work, it was all just too hopeless. John wrote, quote, "It must really suck to get a letter like the one you read from the woman who thinks that reflecting on her last original thought is absurd. If we're unwilling to examine our own thinking, then we deserve a miserable ending." Close quote. Well, I don't know about that one, but you got some airtime, John. Azusa wrote, "Hello from Japan. I am always listening to your radio show on Hay House Radio. I love every time when you say that your wife has the cutest smile. It just makes me feel I want to have a great relationship with my future husband like you guys have." Well, it is indeed a pretty smile, Azusa. Any comments on that letter, Rav?
I'm blushing, but we have a wonderful relationship. I love you.
How do you blush?
Cheeky. I almost used a three-letter word then. I caught myself now.
Okay. Quit. A little composure here. Now, 2 weeks ago, I indulged in a bit of a rant, and Richard wrote, quote, "I just went back and got last week's show and listened to Eldon's rant. I am gratified and fortified by it. I get so very, very tired of the emotionally frothed but intellectually vapid rants of fellow Facebookies. I fear the population at large has simply abandoned any interest in the acquisition of thinking skills. I saw one of Einstein's less generous quotes the other day, something to the effect that most people need little more than their brainstem to operate at the level in which they are functioning. If we are to live outside the envelope of the common man, we will need the emotional support and upbraiding as necessary of those so disposed to rise above the constraints of our animal survivalist subbrains. Most of my friends have no interest in these subject matters and find brain science to be supremely nerdy. But most people are quite open to the idea that we are brainwashed. So occasionally I get an idea over the fence to them." Close quote. Well, thanks for the thoughtful letter, Richard. I sometimes tend to agree with you, my friend. Now, I must insert something here, though. If you have joined me on Facebook and paid any attention, then you know that I will sometimes post baits. That's B-A-I-T-S, like fisherman baits, to watch how people respond. And typically, they'll be emotional or intellectual in their nature. So, for example, I have posted emotionally laden information but asked for an intellectual response and discovered that almost always it is an emotion and not the intellect that responds. Once I posted a handwriting expert's testimony that was complete with the methods used to determine the document in question to be a forgery. I asked, "What do you think of the methods employed behind the examiner's opinion?" There were many, many responses, but none of them answered my question. One person even publicly unfriended me for posting the piece. Why? Because it was all about President Obama's birth certificate. And believe me, the responses were often vitriolic in both directions. Some defended the president and used whatever means to marginalize what they call the birthers. And as for those who were opposed to President Obama, well, their answer was, of course it was a fraud. However, again, not one, no one, treated the question. What do you think of the methods used to examine the document? We live in a community that can be very divided on issues without much more than sound bites to back their reasoning. This past week, I posted a quote by Albert Einstein, and I was appalled by the first responses that the quote precipitated. Einstein said, "The world is a dangerous place to live, not because of the people who are evil, but because of the people who don't do anything about it." There's nothing controversial about this to me at all. Of course, if good men do nothing to stop or prevent evil in the world, then evil will proliferate unabated. Perhaps it's my experience and background in law enforcement that leads me to conclude as obvious what I have seen in the real world. But then maybe my vision is skewed. For here's some of the comments that were posted. Quote, "Not sure I believe Albert on this one," close quote. Or, quote, "I find when I turned off the TV and the other media and take care of my own, the world is a pretty happy place with nice food and clean sheets to sleep in at night. I just don't let the chatter enter my world." Close quote. Or try this one. Quote, "Kind of puts the blame on the good people. Makes me wonder which category Albert was in." Close quote. Or, "I think the world is a dangerous place if you believe it to be, or if you allow society, news, government to convince you it is." Or try this one. "Albert was tormented." Now, I can understand this one, but I still can't own it. Quote, "Trying to help has caused me to suffer." Close quote. So I'm asking you, do you think putting your head in the sand, tuning out the world, eliminates the suffering people endure around the world? So long as we have clean, warm sheets with nice food, nothing else really matters? Or, in the alternative, do we have a moral responsibility to be aware of the suffering of others and to do our best to abate that suffering? Should we do what is necessary to be informed and conscientious citizens, or should we ignore matters of this nature and tell ourselves sweet nothings just as long as it doesn't affect us? I think you all get where I am, but I'd like your opinion, so please write me at eldon@eldontaylor.com. Okay, moving on. Ruth wrote, "I heard Eldon on Hay House 2013 and bought his self-hypnosis book, loving it, very helpful in releasing old patterns." Susan wrote, "I bought the self-hypnosis and subliminal technology book at Christmas time. I made a subliminal recording using the suggestions in the book. I listened to it and was able to earn my gold medal in riding my dressage horse. I am looking forward to accomplishing more goals, but most of all, I just enjoy being happy." I love that letter.
Me
like
too.
That?
I do.
Great for you, Susan. C wrote, "Thanks for the beautiful newsletter. I like your thing about forgiveness. Sometimes that has been a real tough area for me because I've been hurt by people I've trusted, so-called friends, and worst of all, family members. Since I've retired, I spent many hours each day with my InnerTalk programs. I may not totally be aware I want to be. I may not totally be where I want to be. I'll get that read. But day by day, I am being molded into that better person I want to be. I also love AIAO, awesome in, awesome out. That is beautiful. I appreciate all that you do to help me and the world." Well, thank you for the letter. Now, if you don't get my free newsletter already, you can register it by going to eldontaylor.com. And by the way, AIAO is my suggested replacement for GIGO, or garbage in, garbage out. Let's all just be awesome in, awesome out. You'll buy that, won't you, Rav?
I will.
Kimberly wrote, "After listening to you on the Hay House Summit, I could have kicked myself for not looking into your work earlier. I know all too well how the subconscious stuff affects me, my decisions, and my life." Margie wrote, "Love the quality of your products. I'm a frequent buyer." Connie wrote, "Another fan here. We use the CDs in every bedroom at night. using the nature option, and during the day when I'm home, I always have one playing in the background. There are great titles for the whole family to benefit. Thanks for all you do, Dr. Taylor. And Carl wrote, Hello, Eldon. I just wanted to share something with you. My girlfriend and I have spent a significant amount of time on your website recently, and we are so grateful for all the informative and enlightening information. She is a day trader and deals with a great deal of stress. In any case, we have been listening to your archived Mind Matters radio shows as well as your Inner Talk programs. After sampling numerous different ones, yesterday we purchased 5 of them. Ironically, just as I am typing this and she is unaware that I am sending you an email, she said from across the room that she is so grateful to have the sample of overcoming self-destructive behavior because it helps increase her confidence in her trading. Until the disc arrives, she is going to listen to the sample on repeat. While she knows that she can't control the market, she feels that by being more in tune with her inner voice and getting self-sabotaging beliefs out of the way, she will have a better success. And I agree. I believe that in life we should always express gratitude when we feel it and when the opportunity arrives. Your books, your Inner Talk program, and all of the information that you share are making a difference in our lives and in the world at large. For that, I send you heartfelt gratitude. Regardless of where the journey leads you, please know that what you do is appreciated. And I love the letter. It's a great letter. Thank you very much, Carl. I'm honored. Ravinder, you want to add anything to, you use them all day long, every day on your smartphone. Is that right? I
do. I definitely do. And I find them absolutely invaluable. In fact, right this moment, I'm using your bruxism program at night because I was having some issues, and it's, something I was struggling with for the last couple of weeks. It's just suddenly, why don't I put them on sooner? Why do I wait?
I do that all the time. I need to remember to put my memory program on. All right, that's all the time we're going to take for letters today, but I do invite you to opine by sending your email to eldon@eldontaylor.com or by joining me on Facebook. We can't get all of your letters on the air, but they do impact our programming, and once again, I both appreciate and thank you for your feedback and continued support. Now to today's show, The Tapping Solution with Nick Ortner. EFT, Emotional Freedom Techniques, otherwise known as tapping, is a combination of ancient Chinese acupressure and modern psychology that is reportedly providing startling results across the spectrum. From pain relief to healing childhood traumas to clearing limiting financial beliefs to weight loss, body image and food cravings to fears and phobias. Nick's copy states, quote, tapping concentrates on specific meridian endpoints while focusing on negative emotions or physical sensations. Combined with affirmations and reinforcing statements, tapping helps calm the nervous system to restore the balance of energy and body and rewire the brain to respond in healthy ways, close quote. Now, I have to admit, when I first heard of tapping, I thought this was the silliest thing I'd heard of in a long time. My mental process primarily went something like, sure, I'm going to tap my wrist and tell myself sweet somethings and, a miracle will happen. Since then, I've done quite a bit of investigating, and there's no doubt that tapping can be beneficial. However, any independent investigation is going to turn up things like an article in Skeptical Inquirer that argue that there is no plausible mechanism to explain how the specifics of EFT could add to its effectiveness. And they have been described as unfalsifiable and therefore pseudoscientific. And or perhaps this comment regarding the research data and methodology, quote, a 2009 review found methodological flaws in some research studies that had reported small successes for EFT and related tapping acupressure techniques. The review concluded that positive results may be attributable to well-known cognitive and behavioral techniques that are included with the energy manipulation, close quote. Now, the review continues. Psychologists and researchers should be wary of using such techniques and make efforts to inform the public about the ill effects of therapies that advertise miraculous claims. All right, indeed, in a recent study at the University of Lethbridge, their conclusion stated, and again I'm going to quote, these results do not support the idea that the purported benefits of EFT are uniquely dependent on the tapping of meridians. Rather, these results suggest that the reported effectiveness of EFT is attributable to characteristics it shares with more traditional therapies. Close quote. So what's the truth here? Is tapping like Mesmer's magnets? We think it's the magnets when indeed it's suggestibility, or what James Bray dubbed hypnotism. There is, after all, a lot of suggestion. Its rapid fire or rapid pace is an element used in hypnosis. Combine a little bit of psychotherapy with an element of magic, tapping the meridians, and voila, a cure. And what if it is only just that? Does it matter? Do I need to intellectually understand electricity to throw the switch and enjoy the light? Well, we'll ask our guest these questions and more today. So let me tell you a little about today's guest. Nicholas Ortner is CEO of the Tapping Solution, a company with a mission to bring simple, effective, natural healing into the mainstream through emotional freedom technique, or tapping. In 2013, Nick created the Tapping Solution Foundation, which has already raised over $100,000 for charitable work in Newtown, Connecticut, to support the community after the tragic shootings at the Sandy Hook Elementary School. He is the creator and executive producer of a hit documentary film, The Tapping Solution. He also produces the annual worldwide online event, the Tapping World Summit, which has been attended by over 500,000 people. And Nick has his own radio show right here on Hay House, so let's get him in here. Welcome to Provocative Enlightenment, Mr. Nick Ortner.
Eldon, thanks for having me on.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Now, to begin with, you heard my description of tapping. What would you like to add to it in order to flesh it out?
Well, your description, I think most of your research comes from Wikipedia, from what I gather on those studies that you quoted. And
no, that wouldn't be true. I mean, I don't want to cut you off, but no, it comes from pretty well across the board. But go ahead.
Well, and the reason I mentioned Wikipedia is, if you search for EFT and you get the Wikipedia entry, you get a very biased entry. I mean, you might be familiar with some of Wikipedia's history in terms of the skeptics that dominate it and make it so you can't put anything else up there. There are over 60 clinical research studies on EFT, and every time we try to make a change on Wikipedia for it, it lasts about an hour, and then it gets taken down again. So that's why I reference,
well, that's a whole new controversy I'm not aware of. Now, next week we have Michael Shermer on the show, and I'm sure you know who that is.
No, I don't know who Michael is.
He is the editor of Skeptic.
There we go.
He is, yeah. And of course, he is a very bright person. And he makes some very bright points, but sometimes they're completely out of the scope of what we tend to accept over here. There's always two sides to the argument, but I was not familiar with the fact that you believe that Wikipedia is under tight control of a few skeptics.
Yeah, and it was something that I wasn't aware of until, I talked to some people in the EFT community, and it's pretty shocking because you actually, we have, triple-blind clinical studies that have been published in peer-reviewed journals, and they get deleted as quickly as we put them on there. So the Wikipedia entry for EFT doesn't say, I don't mind an entry that lists the studies that you talked about that disagree with it, but also that lists the studies that agree with it. The challenge is that it's just the studies that show any positive outcome have been taken away completely. They just don't last on there.
Now, I did find studies. I found several studies that support the idea of the process. I think what I've seen when you talk about the negative is I don't see anybody saying EFT or tapping doesn't work. What I see them saying is that it isn't the meridian system, or it isn't this, or it isn't that. It's kind of, right back to what I said in the setup.
Sure.
Is it Mesmer's magnets, or is it the suggestibility? Is it, the whole combination of events? So what I didn't find was someone that said EFT is a hoax or a fraud. What I did find were these several of the studies of the kind that I mentioned in the setup piece, but there were also a number of other studies that you're referring to that talked about the benefits that were involved. So let's talk about some of that. In one piece, I heard you say that there were more than 500 studies. And I just heard you say that there were some 60 studies. I think the biggest thing about the studies, if I may, Nick, is that when you search for the studies, what you get are all these EFT sites. And, that kind of makes it look like, more of a commercial than, scientific research. So I take it that this is an issue that you must be dealing with on a pretty regular basis. Is it?
Not really. Simply because, the people that I talk to are just delighted by the results that they're experiencing personally. That's been my focus from the beginning. Certainly, if you search for the studies, they land on EFT sites. But, for example, if you go to EFTuniverse.com, which is an EFT site, and you click on the research link there, it has a bunch of studies, but they all reference where they were published. So these are, studies that have been published in other journals. My focus is just, and it has been from the beginning, certainly I'm excited about the new research that's coming in. The last 5 years has been a drove of research. For the last 30 years, this technique has been around, but the focus really wasn't on the research, and I think that hurt it in a lot of ways in terms of its growth and development. But for the last 5 years, there has been a tremendous amount of research, slow going as it goes, and expensive to conduct, and getting better, all the time. But what I've been excited about from the beginning has been my personal experience with it, and the experience of tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people at this point who are finding, and perhaps, I know oftentimes people try to isolate it. Is it the tapping? Is it this? Is it that? And I don't know if we'll ever isolate it, and I think it could be, as you said, a combination of everything. I think it has a lot of factors going for it. But,
let me ask you this. Yeah. This is Provocative Enlightenment, so you get the hardball questions. It doesn't matter who you are. I like what you do, so let's get that on the record. But nevertheless, I'm going to ask you the hard questions. It appears that what you may be doing and what your practitioners may be doing, based on not just some of the studies, but many of the implications from the findings, is actually practicing psychology, or a form of energy psychology. Does it concern you that someone is going to stand up and say, you're practicing psychology without a license? The further you get down the road to accrediting this technique, the closer you get to perhaps those few who would like to have that cartel in their backyard coming after you in that vein. Does that concern you at all?
It doesn't. I guess it could concern me. I understand the point that you're making. I certainly never personally approach it as practicing psychology. I share it as a method that people can use for themselves in the same way I consider myself a friend, a coach. There are a lot of psychologists and psychiatrists who use this in their practice, and that number is growing on a daily basis. In my hometown of Newtown, Connecticut, where we've been working for the last 6 months, we've been training local psychologists and psychiatrists, social workers, people with accreditation and the degrees to bring this tool into their practice. And they're turning to it because they've seen, time and again that the methods that they are used to working with, especially in a situation as tragic and traumatizing as the events in Newtown, the shooting in December, have simply not worked. And study or no study, research or no research, when they're coming to this training, over 100 people so far in the last couple months being trained, because they recognize that they're getting better results with this than anything else that they're approaching or experiencing. So, I think there is a tide. Obviously, you're always going to have people. And I think part of the challenge, this technique has been around for 30 years, so it often begs the question, why did it take so long to hit, this sort of mainstream consciousness? And I think that initially some of the claims that were being made about it were a little too strong. Some of the discussions were, hey, this works, and if you're not using it, you're an idiot. That was sort of the approach. everyone should be using it. And that tone has changed in the last decade to one of cooperation, to one of saying, how do you bring this tool into your practice? And
we have a hard break coming up, so I'm going to ask you to hold it there, Nick.
Sure.
When we come back, one of the things that you have brought to tapping is a level of credibility, and I want to go into what brought you, why you came, etc. We're speaking with Nick Ortner about his work and book, The Tapping Solution. If you're in our chat room, if you're not there, you want to be, because we have a film of Nick. Do stay tuned. You don't want to miss what's coming up after a few words from some of our friends.
Unlock the power of your mind. This is Provocative Enlightenment with Eldon Taylor.
And welcome back. If you just joined us, we're speaking with Mr. Nick Ortner about his work and book, The Tapping Solution. But before we get back to the show, I want to invite you to join me on Facebook. I post regularly everything from where I am and what's on next to the latest in science, technology, and consciousness studies. And from time to time, some of my own opinions about the world we live in. I also want to remind you to be sure and register to receive my free newsletter when you visit my site and get your free MP3. All right. Before the break, we were talking about, we actually spent the first half of the show looking at the controversy. Let's do this if we can, Nick. I was impressed by your story about how you got involved in tapping altogether. So share that story with the audience, and then let's talk about not just the benefits, but some of the procedures, how they can actually use this tool. And use it today to benefit their lives.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'm just really, I like to consider, people ask me, what are you, who are you, how did you get into this? I'm just a very excited person. I am somebody that found this for myself personally about a decade ago and was certainly skeptical at first, was, confused about it. How is this tapping? Like you said in the beginning of the show, it's doing what? And it seemed really silly, but I tried it, and I had some initial experiences that were really powerful, where real shifts were happening. Some pain relief experiences where I remember waking up one morning with some pain in my neck that from sleeping wrong, and it would usually last a day or two, and I tapped for 10 minutes, and it went away. So that just kind of shocked me, and I've seen really astounding things with regards to pain relief in the decade since then. So I started using it with myself and then friends and family. The running joke became that don't say anything's wrong around Nick because he'll just convince you to try the tapping. So, from that passion, I took that forward and made a documentary film about it, The Tapping Solution. And it was really on a whim, on a passion, saying, this is so powerful. What if we got it on tape and actually showed, there's a lot of things like we talked about in the controversy before of, seeing what people write online, pros and cons and case studies and testimonials. I wanted to show it. I wanted to document it. And that's what we did. We took 10 people from around the country with problems like fibromyalgia and chronic back pain and PTSD and debilitating grief and weight loss, weight gain issues, and we brought them together to try to use the tapping on them, and we showed it all on camera. We showed what worked, we showed what didn't work, and fortunately over those couple of days the results were quite extraordinary. And I've spent the last 5 years since the film came out really just sharing my personal experience with it, sharing the film, and now the book through Hay House.
Okay, now, this was your first film, is that right?
Yeah.
I mean, and you basically walked in to do the film without experience, without money, without connections, without. So what do you, I mean, when you look at this, what do you just got some kind of magic, or are you just in the flow, or what's the deal?
No, that's a great question, because it was the case. When we bought, I spent about $25,000-$30,000 right off the bat on film equipment, on my credit cards and credit lines, and it was literally sitting in a living room with my younger sister, who was one of the producers, and my best friend, who ended up being the director and editor, and just unpacking boxes and saying, "Is this a light? I think this is a light. What do we do with this?" And we didn't know anybody in the industry and community. I mean, even within the EFT community, we didn't know people. We had to show up at seminars and events and introduce ourselves and say, "We're making a movie. Can we film you for it?" And so, it was certainly a lot of passion along the way. I mean, the road wasn't 100% clear and easy. We had our challenges. We had our struggles. We had points where we said, how can we make this film? where we would ask ourselves, how are we going to tell this story? Because we're trying to do something very different in telling the story of these 10 people while at the same time having experts like Jack Canfield and Bruce Lipton and Dr. Joe Mercola chime in on the technique. So we literally didn't know how to tell this story as filmmakers, and we just kept trying, and we kept trying and working on it and putting our best efforts forward, and to the point where we released the film about a year after we started making it, which is pretty quick in filmmaking time. The primary motivation for releasing it was I had spent $150,000 so far on it, and I needed to sell it because I didn't have money for my rent. So we released it, but we didn't give up on it. And we got great reviews right when we released it, but we continued to work on it. We continued to work on the color and the sound and things that we didn't have the money to do along the way. So I think it's a testament to just having that drive and also to using EFT along the way. I mean, many nights I used tapping when I felt frozen and stuck and really doubting myself and doubting my ability to move forward. And I use the technique itself to get the movie out there.
So now that's where I wanted to go. You use tapping in order to make the movie, the film. And by the way, before we get off this, where would our listening audience get this film if they wanted to?
It's available at thetappingsolution.com. So it's just THE tappingsolution.com, and it's also on Amazon.
And it's a great film. Okay, but now, so here we are. I get tapping, where the meridians are concerned for pain, and it's, I understand the mind-body connection, but what most people don't understand is you can use tapping for things like money. You can use tapping for, mental blocks, if you will, or you're just saying, you become discouraged, maybe depleted financially, and you would use tapping in order to finish the film. Flesh that out for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, for a long time, for the last 20, 30 years, the discussion around how the tapping worked and things like this was sort of very general talk about a disruption in the energy system and balancing the meridians and stuff that, certainly there's more data coming in on it. There's a lot of ancient data on it, and it's a very old system, but it didn't have the rigorous scientific basis that some of the new research has, which is pointing to the fight or flight response in our body, the amygdala in the brain, is showing that the tapping and similar forms of acupressure and acupuncture and stimulating these meridians is actually sending a calming signal to the amygdala. It's telling the body and the brain that it's safe. The way I see it, with that understanding, and when we talk about finances, is, let's say I'm 6 months into making the movie, $100,000 in debt, and I hit a roadblock. That's a fight or flight moment, right? My body, I feel like I'm in danger. I feel unsafe, and the stress response comes up. When the stress response comes up, when it can be, it can totally freeze you. Your blood flows away from your forebrain into your limbs, and you don't have the resources to think creatively to move through the block. So that's when I would bring tapping in. And, so even though I'm totally stuck and overwhelmed, and focusing on the challenges that are in front of me, tapping down that anxiety, clearing it, and then that's when new ideas and inspirations come forward.
We had Neil Slade on the show not too long. He's the author of the book Tickling the Amygdala.
Oh, there you go.
And it sounds like this. I mean, the amygdala has, of course, the two functions. It has this fear, but it also has this the opposite. And so what you're saying is the new research is suggesting that that's what you are doing. You're actually tickling the amygdala, to use that phrase of Slade. You're transposing it from the fight, flight, the fear, the anxiety, to the more euphoric, to the more positive. Did I get that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's from those places, if we think about when we have our best ideas and our creative brainstorms, it's in the shower, it's in the bathtub, people say walking through nature. It's rarely during these stress responses, during the hustle and bustle of work, when phone calls are flying and emails are flying towards us, that we come up with the inspiration on how to solve a problem. So I look at tapping as one of, in the same way that meditation might be or hypnosis might be, tapping is one of the ways to calm that amygdala and bring that creative energy forward.
Okay, now Nick, I understand the meridian system, acupuncture, acupressure, et cetera, but I would imagine there are a good deal of people in our audience that are unfamiliar with that. So Tell us a little bit about what these energy meridians are. And I mean, do you see them as being related to chakras, or is there any of that kind of balancing work going on when you're manipulating the energy or clearing blockages? Tell us a little, unpack that for us.
Yeah. A lot of people do the tapping focused on chakras. I personally, not that I don't believe in chakras. I mean, I think there's a lot of very interesting evidence around it, especially when we look at the different glands in our body, thymus, pineal, the major centers of our bodies as they correlate to chakras. I like to really, and I think, you asked before the break one of the questions as to why it's spreading now and sort of what my part has been into it. I like to keep the message very simple and just focus on the brain and the amygdala, because that's what makes sense to me. That's what the latest research is showing. And I think when we venture too far into the chakras and the energy body, it opens us up for, for the kind of criticism that, I don't care about being criticized personally. I care about the technique being criticized, because the effect that I have seen it have on people's lives is so profound that it at least bears exploring with an open mind. One of the things that I get most frustrated about with the skeptics is that I don't think they're coming into it with an open mind.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to always have an open mind.
I totally understand, and of course, you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater over some description or use of a label that, for all intent and purposes, puts a bad light on it, as you say, gives somebody the laughing point, and to the skeptic, a good belly laugh is worth 1,000 syllogisms, and so that's the first place they aim.
Tapping is such I sort of see it as an open source technique, open source.
I like that.
Usually referring to software, right?
Yeah.
The Linux systems, the thing that anyone can take the basic operating code and system and add their own ideas to it. That's why you find clinicians who bring it into their practice. That's why you find medical doctors that bring it into their practice. There's a urologist in California, Dr. Eric Robbins, who he works at a big hospital, and when he has done his regular work, when he's checked on all the physical things that he has to and that he should as part of being a physician, and he finds that people aren't healing, aren't getting the results that they're looking for, he brings the emotional component in. He brings the tapping in as a tool that people can use. So everyone does their own thing with it. Some people do it with chakras. Other people do it with essential oils. There's massage therapists that when they find they've been working on a client for 6 weeks and that muscle is just not letting go no matter what they do, they bring the tapping in and look at the emotional component and tap on releasing that muscle.
When I read some of the comments about your first summit, tapping summit, I was reminded of, what happened in the hypnosis field 30, 35 years ago, 40 years ago, at a time when you could use hypnosis anywhere, and to where we are today, where there's licensure laws and certification and da-da-da-da-da. When you talk about the broad diversity, it is a diversity within a field that normally causes it to formalize in ways that lead to certification, because there are people that say, well, this is better, and well, that's not good, that are within your own field. Do you see tapping moving down that same highway in the future?
Well, it's certainly had some of those, for good or for ill, bumps in the road with regards to that. People debate who should be certified and who should be able to have this practice. So I do think that there will probably be, more barriers to entry in terms of I am saying that I am, available to be hired to do this for you. Right. And I don't have a problem with that. As long as the barriers to entry are reasonable, and I don't have a problem with more, oversight, because it's an important issue, and why not have people better trained doing a better job? What I hope doesn't happen is that it never gets taken away from the individual, and I just can't see how it would. I think the idea, well, certainly for hypnosis you have to be certified, and there's different boards and this, that, and the other, but people can do their own self-hypnosis, right?
That's right.
There's no way to govern and control that, and I think is the same with tapping. That people can be empowered, and it's such a powerful tool that they can learn at their therapist's office, and then the therapist can say, you know, you don't need me between sessions. If I see you once a month or once a week, when you're home, take this tool home. This is something that you can do for yourself. So these panic attacks that you're getting and you just felt lost and you wanted to call me up, or the only place that you felt safe was in my office, you now have this tool that you can use. And I think that's one of the more powerful aspects of it, that people are being re-empowered to say, you know, I have a lot more control over my own mind, body, and spirit than I've been told or that I believe.
Right. Now, your book, you know, one of the things that, I mean, between the book and the film, you actually give a course on how to use tapping, and you provide a number of exercises. So, you know, do this. One of the exercises that I really like is your exercise on personal peace. Yeah. Share with the audience just exactly what they might do in order to do a tapping exercise to gain peace.
Yeah, absolutely. And the personal peace procedure is one that I share in the book, but it's not mine. It was originated by Gary Craig, who's the developer of EFT. EFT being one of the main branches of tapping and the one I focus on. It's a wonderful procedure where basically the idea behind it is to sit down and find some quiet time, take 30 minutes, take an hour, sometimes take several hours or do it over a couple of days, and just make a list. You know, go through your life, think back on childhood and elementary school and middle school and high school and birth and everything you can think of, your whole life. Just run it back year by year and identify places where you're still holding on. You know, memories, ideas, thoughts, feelings where there's still a charge of some sort. And I sort of identify the charge as just saying, you know, if you think about a memory, if you think about something that happened in high school, for example, most of us had breakups of one kind or another in high school, and you can think of one breakup and go, yeah, I mean, I was 16 years old and my girlfriend dumped me and it was sad then, but I'm fine. You know, it was a long time ago. And then there's another kind of memory you think about, and same kind of story, 16 years old and she dumped me, and when I think about it, I get this pain in my heart. I feel queasy in my stomach. It's somehow still holding on to me. So you make a list of these events and then use the tapping procedure to go one by one, you know, one a day, two a day, whatever feels comfortable, looking at that event, running it through your mind again, and doing the tapping to release that energetic charge, to release that fight or flight response in the amygdala. And it's through that process that where I've seen really tremendous life changes, because it's not just taking 5 or 10 minutes and saying, oh, I did 5 minutes of tapping and I feel better. It's saying, how do I clean up all this stuff that I've been holding on to? That's when some really significant change happens.
Yeah, and that's the reason I asked you about this particular exercise. Now, you heard the setup piece we were going in, and a week ago, you know, we had quite a bit of conversation about a mentality out there that just thinks, you know, you wave the wand and, you know, everything is fixed right now.
Yeah.
But when you really go into the use of tapping, it's not what some people call it, a quick fix. I mean, it requires doing your homework, as you just said, you know, going back, finding these issues, doing your uncovering before you actually begin the procedure. And if I got that correct, Nick?
Yeah, you do 100%. And one of the, again, I think this sort of falls in the challenges that EFT has had in the last 30 years into hitting that mainstream consciousness is that for a long time, the focus was on these 1-minute miracles, they were called, or 5-minute miracles, because they do occur. I mean, I've seen people who have 30 years of back pain do tapping for 5 minutes or even an hour, which is still super fast, and have it go away. So that kind of, you know, blows us away and says, oh, my gosh, this is incredible. And that was the focus for a long time. And that focus tended to give people's attention to that as the ideal or the normal. And I think that hurts it, because it's still fast. If it does take you days or months to work through this, it's still powerful. But with that ideal of the 1-minute miracle, people tend to give up just way too quickly on it, as they do in, as you know, a variety of self-help techniques.
That's right.
They think, well, if I read this book and my life isn't better tomorrow, you know, then it didn't work. And we need to transition away from that pill mentality. I mean, that's what the rest of society operates on. You know, swallow the pill and everything's better. To a mentality that really acknowledges how we feel on a daily basis, what's happened in our past, and the fact that it might take a little bit of time to clean it up.
Right. I think for all intent and purposes, we really need to look at it twofold. We look at it long term simply means life is dynamic, and how high is up. You're always going to be working on something. There isn't a destination. It is a process. And in short term, okay, I want to deal with an issue specific, and I'm going to clean that up. That's my kind of take on it. But now let me ask you this. Since you were talking about pain, do you want to share the story of Patricia?
Yeah, absolutely. Patricia was so this was for our Tapping Solution documentary film, and, we had hundreds of applications. We just basically put it out online through a couple different sources, and all these people wrote in with applications wanting to come to the event. And Patricia was one of the people. She had fractured her L1 vertebrae in a boating accident. It was actually a first date, and a guy trying to show off a little too much probably, and she went flying up in the air and fractured her vertebrae, and her life was changed dramatically. She had to they put rods and screws and bolts and all sorts of things in her back. She was told she would never be able to do yoga again. She had to wear a brace. She was in pain, 99% of the time, taking painkiller meds, sleeping meds, the whole gamut. And when we were going through the applications, I remember so clearly my sister, who I mentioned was part of the project, said to me, well, Patricia has a clear physical challenge. She fractured L1. She has rods and screws. This isn't an emotional issue. This isn't psychosomatic pain. We shouldn't bring her. And I was really compelled by her story and had a different intuition on it, so I used my big brother veto on it, and I said, no, she's coming. She's going to be great. And sure enough, she had incredible results. Within the first hour of tapping, she focused on the feeling in her back of all the rods and screws and plates. She could feel it, and it was uncomfortable. And she did the tapping, and that feeling went away altogether. She described that the battery pack that she had just seemed to have disappeared somehow. By the end of the weekend, she was pain-free. We followed up with her 6 months later. She came back to Connecticut, and we filmed her along with the other people. And she was still pain-free. She wasn't taking any pain medications. She was doing yoga again. So a dramatic transformation from doing the tapping for pain relief.
Yeah, I found that to be an incredible part of the film, an incredible story. So what kind of physical sensation, then, is it that I'm going to have when I'm doing the tapping, Nick?
Yeah, well, most people sense relaxation very quickly. So they'll find that they're taking deeper breaths. Some people yawn, which is, often a sign of relaxation. I joke with people because when I speak live at Hay House events, we've shared the stage together, and I look out in the audience or in smaller groups, and I see people yawning as they're tapping. I let them know that I'm not offended, that I know they're not I'm not boring them. It's a response. Some people sneeze, some people burp, but there can be a definite relaxing of the body, and beyond that, as you focus on the memory that is intrusive, that you can't let go of, or the anger that you've had for the last couple of weeks and you just keep trying to forgive and you can't let go of. When you do the tapping, it's a strange experience, especially the first couple of times, because there's just a distance to the event, to the feeling, to the emotion that wasn't there before. You could try to people describe it as trying to grab onto it, like I'm trying to be angry, but I can't. I'm running the memory again, and I'm trying to feel the fear, but it's no longer there.
All right, quickly, I've got two questions, and you got 1 minute for both.
Sure.
First one, can I tap to increase psychic ability?
I don't see why not, but I don't know. I haven't done it personally.
You haven't done that one, huh?
No. But, certainly you can tap around the limiting beliefs around it, So if part of you doesn't believe that you can do it or it's true, you can focus on that limiting belief, negative emotion, tap, and open up the door to it happening.
All right. Second question. Everybody out there after hearing you is going to want to know where to get the book, the film, how they can connect with you, how they can learn more about tapping, and so forth. So tell us how they do that.
Yeah, our main website is thetappingsolution.com. You can get the first 2 chapters of the book for free on there, which is all the science and research and how to do the tapping. So you can learn the tapping for free. You don't have to pick up the book. And the book is available at bookstores everywhere, Amazon, on our site, and all over the place. And from our website, you'll hear more about the things that we have going on, like the annual Tapping World Summits and pain relief events and products and much more.
And indeed, it's a New York Times bestseller. It's definitely a book that you're going to want to look at. And it's a technique that it's not going to go away. It's not a phenomena in that sense, and yet it is a phenomena. Appreciate you coming on the show and sharing. When's your Hay House show, real quick?
Wednesday, 3 o'clock Eastern.
Wednesday, 3 o'clock. All right. Well, we've come to the end of another hour of Provocative Enlightenment. I do want to thank our behind-the-scenes team, Kyle and Joe, as well as the rest of the gang at Hay House Radio for making what we do on this show so pleasurable. And, of course, a big thank you to our guests and to all of you for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed our show, and will join us again next week, same time and same place. And wherever you are in your world, until then, remember, believing in yourself always matters.